I can't take it anymore. I can't take it. There's just too much to talk about with the Philadelphia Eagles. Reports are swirling, rumors, articles are coming out. It's just too much for me to handle. I got to come talk about this stuff, this dysfunctional franchise. Reports from Adam Schefter about Carson Wentz. They're just... I didn't think it would come to this. I did not think that we would be here today when the season first started. But we're here. We are here. Reports just came out. Adam Schefter tweeted it. While questions have persisted about what the Eagles would do with Carson Wentz, the more appropriate question might be what Carson Wentz will do with the Eagles. Sources believe Wentz is not pleased with recent events there. If things don't turn around, Carson Wentz isn't interested in being a backup in Philadelphia anymore. And I can't blame him. And so in the event that he is no longer the starting QB with the Philadelphia Eagles, he most likely will demand a trade. Now, this is the thing I can't stand. So we got to break all this stuff down. We're going to get into Wentz on this edition of the AC podcast. We're going to get into Carson Wentz. We're going to get into Howie Roseman. We're going to get into Doug Peterson. I got to break down this dysfunction layer by layer. And even Jeffrey Lurie, we got to get into him too, because he's responsible for this nonsense as well, because he's condoned a lot of this foolishness. But we got to start with Carson Wentz, of course. This is so disheartening, but I can't blame him. If y'all want to throw me in the category of Wentz apologists, that's fine. I still believe in Carson Wentz. I still believe he could be a top-tier quarterback. I'm probably one of the few people that believe that, and you can call me foolish, but I still believe he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I just believe it. But I understand, we're in this society where we fall prey to, what's in the present, and we don't project any potential. We just cancel people at the first sight of bad play. So I understand it. And I'm not going to condone what Carson Wentz has been doing this season as far as his performance on the field. I've already said that he deserved to be benched. He should be benched. But I also said he should be the starting quarterback next year going into the future, and the Eagles should fix him. But others don't believe that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to condone the fact he's completing 58% of his passes. He's leading the league in interceptions, leading the league in off-target throws, leading the league in turnover-worthy plays. No one's going to condone that nonsense. I'm not going to excuse him. Wentz deserves to be held accountable, but the front office should be held accountable as well for their mishaps. Wentz should not be the scapegoat, but it appears like he is. Him and Doug Peterson, it looks like they're going to be the scapegoats. And the weasel that is Howie Roseman is going to continue surviving like a cancer in this organization. Now people are getting on Wentz and they're engaging in character assassination. And for the life of me, I just don't get it. He's being labeled soft because he doesn't want to compete. He's being labeled selfish because this report came out on game day, most likely from Wentz's agent or someone in his camp, not him directly. And Wentz is a guy. He's a nice guy to the media. I don't think that he would do something like this, but most likely it was somebody from his camp leaking the information not on his behalf or not per his request. He's being labeled a bad teammate because he doesn't support Jalen Hurts. He was clapping when the dude scored his first touchdown. I mean, how much excitement do you expect the guy to have when he gets benched for the guy when he gets benched for the backup? How much excitement do you think you would have if someone comes in and takes your job and you're a starter in the league? Who's going to be excited about that? I don't know why people are getting on him for that, but that's just nonsense to me. My problem with this whole entire thing is the Eagles. And this is what I mean when they're a dysfunctional franchise. They have never surrounded this guy with the talent. Maybe you can say they tried, but they failed. They attempted to sign guys. They attempted to trade for guys. They kept all these older veteran guys on the roster, but they never surrounded Wentz with a young supporting cast of talent. He is the only Pro Bowler drafted in the last 50 picks that Howie Roseman has done in the draft. Of the last 50 picks Howie Roseman has had, only one of them is a Pro Bowler, and that's Carson Wentz. What is a quarterback supposed to do with that? A bunch of practice squad guys. A bunch of dudes who don't belong in the league. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. You're talking about holding Wentz accountable. Well, when is this front office going to be held accountable for what they haven't done? You talk about Howie Roseman not drafting DK Metcalf. You talk about him passing up on Justin Jefferson for Jalen Reagor, and the Vikings are sitting there clowning you in their draft war room after you chose Jalen Reagor like a bunch of idiots. You talk about drafting Andre Dillard in the first round. You traded up to get him. You don't know anything about him. He's only played a handful of games. In those games, he was terrible. You talk about drafting a project linebacker, Davion Taylor, in the third round out of Colorado, who didn't play any high school games hardly, and then hardly played anything meaningful at Colorado, was not an impressive player that stood out on the film. You talk about drafting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown. Just these evaluations. Derek Barnett in the first round came into the league, had more penalty yards than sacks. Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas aren't on the team anymore. Cut. Donald Pumphrey in a legendary running back class with Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Marlon Mack, James Conner, Aaron Jones. You come out with Donald Pumphrey, a guy that's not in the league anymore. Shelton Gibson, he was buns. Mac Hollins, he was praised by the wide receivers coach for aligning right and assigning right and not catching the football. You talk about drafting Nelson Aguilar, a viral sensation, dude catching babies out of burning buildings, unlike Aguilar. I mean, give me a break here. Can anyone make an argument that this roster construction has been good? You talk about Elisha Qualls. You're talking about Clayton Thorson's. Like, the drafting history of the drafting history of Howie Roseman, it's appalling. This stuff is beyond pathetic. This is the guy who's supposed to be building around Carson Wentz? Like, where are the meaningful picks at? Where are the stars? Where are the contributors? This all can't be on Carson Wentz. He's a victim. Yes, he's playing poorly, but he's also a victim of the GM's numerous gaffes in the draft. I can't stand when people say, oh, you're being paid this certain amount of money, you have to overcome. He overcame it last year when he became the first quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards without a 500-yard receiver. Now, one 500-yard receiver, you throw for 4,000 yards? How's that even possible? And then this year, the only thing meaningful you do to address it is the draft. And you miss on the prospects. Now, Toby in my last episode kind of outlined what the Eagles do with their receivers and why they chose Reagor instead of Jefferson. But the problem is this. You needed good wide receivers, period. And Jalen Reagor, he does not eat. The one thing that he's supposed to be known for is speed. He doesn't even look fast. Jalen Hurts threw him a crossing route, completed a pass on a crossing route that Jalen Reagor had oodles of open space. And this guy doesn't even look fast. He doesn't even look fast. He looks like an average speed player. And then you watch Justin Jefferson, he's over here breaking records held by Randy Moss with the Minnesota Vikings. You watch DK Metcalf, he was leading the league in receiving yards. You look at what DeAndre Hopkins has done for Kyler Murray. You could have traded for him, but you didn't. You look at Stephon Diggs and what he's done for Josh Allen, turn him into an MVP candidate. Josh Allen's balling now. These are moves that the GM could have made. These are moves that he clearly could have made that would have easily helped the Philadelphia Eagles. But no. He opted for Alshon Jeffrey, broken down Deshaun Jackson. Oh, Alshon Jeffrey, who was hurt for the first 9 weeks of the season. A broken down Deshaun Jackson. You give Carson Wentz Jalen Reagor, and he's obviously not as good as Justin Jefferson, clearly. Then you talk about Quez Watkins, a 6th-round pick. John Hightower, a 5th-round pick. Marquise Goodwin opted out. Zach Ertz, his yards after catch are comparable to Jason Witten, who's one of the slowest players known to man. Travis Fulgham, a guy off the practice squad. This is a joke. Dallas Goedert, he was hurt a few games. Miles Sanders, he's having a down year. Doug Pearson doesn't know when to give him the football. Offensive line, Wentz has been sacked 50 some odd times. And for all the people who say he's injury prone, if he was so injury prone, he would have been hurt by now. He's been sacked the most. He's the most sacked quarterback in the league. The one he was starting 10 straight games, he got sacked at least 3+ times. And granted, some of that is on Wentz, of course, but it's also on the offensive line as well. You just look at this nonsense. Like, the Eagles have nobody meaningful. They got nobody meaningful from their 2017 draft. When you were talking about Derek Barnett, Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Matt Collins, Donald Pumphrey, Shelton Gibson, Nathan Gary, who's a scrub, Elijah Qualls. You look at 2018, Dallas Goedert's good. Avonte Maxey's a 5'9" corner playing on the outside. He's not. He's okay. Josh Sweat, he's okay. Matt Pryor and Jordan Mailata, they're backup guys. Where are the stars at? Once again, in 2019, Andre Dillard, we don't know anything about him. That's a 1st-round pick. Miles Sanders, he's good. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's a scrub. Sharif Miller in the 4th round. Clayton Thorson in the 5th round. And then you talk about this year, Jalen Reagor, he's not better than Justin Jefferson. Jalen Hurts, that pick caused controversy and dysfunction. Davion Taylor, he's not good. Kayvon Wallace, he can't even get on the field. Jack Driscoll, he's out for the season. John Hightower, he's okay, but he's a 5th-round pick. Sean Bradley, not on the roster. Quez Watkins, a 6th-round pick. Prince Tega, and then Casey Till. Like, where are the stars in these drafts? Where are the meaningful picks? The only meaningful players are Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders. Those only dudes with Pro Bowl potential. There's no stars. Like, what is this? What do you call this trash? Sure, Howie Roseman can find a bunch of value guys who are in the 6th and 7th rounds that can be, like, depth players, but where are the stars at? There's no stars on this team. There's no Pro Bowl caliber players on this team. So when you're looking at this, and you're looking at what Carson Wentz has had to work with, as far as receivers, and don't even get me started on these are just the guys I just named. Those are just the dudes that are playing this year. Don't get me started on the dudes that he's been playing with in his career. 2 of his first 4 seasons, he had the worst receiving corps in the league. Matt Collins, Shelton Gibson's, Dorial Green-Beckham's, Paul Turner's, Bryce Treggs, Mike Wallace. I mean, give me a break. In practice squad, guys? And you look at all the other young quarterbacks around the league, they have weapons galore. They get surrounded with talent. And this is what I mean when this GM, he's just he's unqualified to be a GM. People keep asking me this. Where does Howie Roseman come from? Howie Roseman has been working for the Eagles since he was 25 years old. He was hired as an intern right out of law school in 2000. Became the director of football administration in 2003 and was promoted to vice president of football administration in 2006. By 2010, he was the GM. This guy came from a law school. No wonder he knows nothing about a football locker room. This guy came from Fordham Law School. So this guy has no football acumen, has no football experience. No wonder he makes such boneheaded decisions. Such mind-numbing, numbskull decisions. No wonder. Because he has no football experience, no football background, despite the fact that he's been around the league for 20 years. You've been in an organization for 20 years and you still don't know not a daggone thing about football. Because if you did, you wouldn't be making these decisions. But I want to go back for a second. I want to go back to Carson Wentz before I get into Howie Roseman. because I'm about to get carried away with this guy. He just upsets me. But for all the people that are excoriating Carson Wentz about not wanting to be a back, like who wants to be a backup? You know, Carson Wentz, he's a nice guy. He plays good for the media, but this guy's not an idiot. I think he can see the writing on the wall that he's going to be scapegoated for this. They replaced him with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts wins a game. It's like, oh, now all the media says, oh, it was Carson Wentz. Of course, you got to get rid of the quarterback. It was all his fault. Everyone's hopping on the Jalen Hurts train after one game because he beat the Saints. The guy completed 56% of his passes. And he had more rushing attempts than passes completed. I mean, give me a break. You can't succeed like that. I need to see more from Jalen Hurts. He's more runner than thrower. And that's not proven to be successful in the NFL. It hasn't. That's not winning you a Super Bowl. We haven't seen it. He's not Kyler Murray, where his best asset is his arm, or Russell Wilson, or Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes. He isn't, even if you want to compare him to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is different. His legs are special. Jalen Hurts, he's a good runner. Lamar Jackson is a special runner. You cannot duplicate what Lamar Jackson does as far as running the ball. He's just a dynamic talent. He's a different breed. So even if you compare him to Lamar Jackson, he's not Lamar. Lamar, he can kill you. Jalen Hurts can hurt you, but Lamar can kill you. He can kill you with his legs. There's a difference. So no, even if you want to compare him to Lamar Jackson, no, he's not Lamar. So I just don't know how successful this can be, number one. But I need to see more from him. But the stuff that people are saying is just blowing my mind. They get on Carson Wentz and they don't get on anyone else. Doug Peterson escapes blame, and Howie Roseman escapes blame. It's all Carson Wentz's fault. And here comes Josina Anderson, one of the main sources of conflict the whole time Carson Wentz has been here. Here comes her tweet about Carson Wentz. Wentz is a good person going through a frustrating time in his young career. Doesn't change he's a central figure in his own performance despite contributing factors. It'd be wiser to remain a good sport rather than have stories leak making him appear selfish hours before game time. She's one to talk. She is one to talk because she is the main source of conflict because Alshon Jeffrey is always running to her every time to criticize the quarterback. So was Alshon Jeffrey being wise when he did those things? Talking about the franchise quarterback that just been paid over $100 million? Like, what is she talking about here? He needs to be a good sport. Was Alshon Jeffrey being a good sport when he was criticizing the quarterback? Oh, no, he gets to open his mouth and you get to report those type of leaks, though. It's okay then. But when Carson Wentz wants out and wants to do something for his career, now all of a sudden it's, he needs to be a good sport and be wiser and not be selfish. You see how people have been casting these aspersions and creating these false narratives about this guy the whole season. The whole season, people have been character assassinating this guy, and I don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And so when we transition, because, when we think about Carson Wentz, he came into the year, the last 3 years, 81 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. He's only 27 years old. He hasn't even started his contract yet. And people are already ready to get rid of this guy. Think about the narrative that we would be running if Jalen Hurts was not on this team right now. Just think about it. If Carson Wentz was struggling like this and Jalen Hurts wasn't on the team, no one would be clamoring for Nate Sudfeld to be playing over Carson Wentz. No one would be clamoring for Carson Wentz to be benched. The narrative would be, how can we fix Carson Wentz for next season? But now the narrative has shifted because the Eagles created their own problems and they drafted Jalen Hurts. Now the narrative has shifted to, Jalen Hurts is on the bench. You got to bench Carson Wentz for him and see what you have in Jalen Hurts. And it's just this organization has not done the things you would do to embrace and support a franchise quarterback. They haven't. Because they're holding Carson Wentz accountable, but they haven't been held accountable for their failures. They haven't. And it's just unfair to me. It's really unfair. How would you feel if you get injured, if you're in the middle of an MVP season, you're going to be the MVP, you get hurt, your team goes on to win the Super Bowl, no one gives you credit for it, even though you got the team the number one seed. And then they build a statue in front of the practice facility with the head coach and the backup quarterback. So you're always living in the shadow of that. And you're constantly reminded of it day to day. People are criticizing your leadership. People are saying you're not coachable. And all this guy's done is be a model citizen. Then you finally carry the team, put the team on your back like people have been clamoring for you to do because you're being paid X amount of dollars. You do it. You get cheap shot at in the back of your head. And now the team goes and drafts your replacement. How would you feel then? How would you feel? It just the stuff that the Eagles have done, it doesn't make any sense. And then it's like I said on my podcast with Toby. Don't sell us this is the guy and then go draft some other dude instead of surrounding the dude you paid with weapons, with resources. As much as it is your talent as a quarterback, it's also who you're surrounded with. I don't know a quarterback that's been successful throwing it to themselves. And we are in a passing league. If you don't have dudes that can get open and separate and catch the football and create explosive plays, you're not going to be good. That's why Tom Brady left New England. That's why Aaron Rodgers was up in arms because the Packers didn't draft a receiver in one of the receiver-rich drafts in NFL history. Like, I don't get what people don't understand about that. It's just, oh, you're getting paid so much money, you got to overcome. So you have to overcome dysfunction in the front office. You have to overcome the worst receiving corps in the league. You have to overcome one of the worst offensive lines in the league in an average defense. I'm supposed to carry that to what exactly? Carry that where? Where are we carrying that? Because I don't see anyone making this argument for Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson is playing like a top 10 quarterback. And no one's saying, oh, he has to carry the team. Where is he carrying them to? 4-8, 4-9? That's why I was saying before, even if Carson Wentz was playing well, I don't think the Eagles will be any better. Because I look at Deshaun Watson, he's playing like a top 10 quarterback, and the Houston Texans are trash. And you could say the same exact things as far as their organization that I'm saying right now about the Philadelphia Eagles. Deshaun Watson has no weapons, no offensive line. His defense is average. And his GM sucks. Although they fired their head coach / GM Bill O'Brien. So things are going to be on the up and up for Deshaun Watson. You can't say the same for Carson Wentz. He's surrounded by a terrible GM. Coaching hasn't been that great this year. Offensive line is porous. Receivers are some of the worst in the league. And his play has suffered because of it. Now, like I said, it's not to excuse him. But I can't just look at all the factors. There's a lot of reasons for why this situation has gone awry. It's not just all Carson Wentz and his poor play. It's not just all his fault. That's my point. But everyone wants to blame him. So now let's get over to the GM because a report came out, and this is the most sickening thing, man. This is the most sickening thing. Report came out. Jeffrey Lurie hasn't even thought about firing Howie Roseman as GM. This is how I know this is going to continue. This same cycle of dysfunction is going to continue until the Eagles get rid of Howie Roseman. Because if he had the answers, we would not be in this predicament. What kind of competent GM consistently passes up on elite talent for aging, sorry veterans? You keep Alshon Jeffrey on this roster, and you have the idiocy of Doug Peterson. I don't know whether, well, let's just tie Doug in with it. Oh my gosh, let me calm down. I don't know whether Doug Peterson's being controlled or whether he actually believes the things that are coming out of his mouth sometimes. Doug Peterson was asked a question about why Alshon Jeffrey is playing over Travis Fulgham, and he says that Alshon Jeffrey is looking good and that he's getting better day by day. What are you talking about? The guy has 3 receptions for 30 yards on 9 targets since coming back in 5 games. He is buns. This guy's not good. He sucks. And Travis Fulgham's leading the team in receiving yards. Like where? And I get it. Teams are playing him differently now. But if you're a good coach, scheme ways to get this guy open. He's a practice squad guy, so my expectations aren't that high. But he was doing something to lead the league in receiving, to lead the team in receiving yards. But Howie Roseman, this guy is a weasel. A weasel who knows nothing about football. And the fact that Jeffrey Lurie hasn't thought about firing him is the problem, which is why I had to loop him in with this foolishness. People inside the organization know that Lurie likes to, there's a quote, Lurie likes to be surrounded by people that he feels he can trust without any reservation. Howie Roseman is one of those guys, I guess. Howie Roseman has survived a lot of power struggles. The one with Chip Kelly, the one between him and Joe Banner, who's Jeffrey Lurie's longtime friend. Jeffrey Lurie got rid of his longtime friend Joe Banner to keep Howie Roseman. And it appears Howie Roseman has his ear. Howie Roseman, this guy, it just appears that the owner has a blind spot for Howie Roseman. Because how can you not see that the deterioration of this team is because of him? He's the biggest reason. Carson Wentz may be the most expensive problem, but Howie Roseman is the biggest problem. That's the difference. Howie Roseman, yes, everyone looks at the fact that the Eagles got into the playoffs the last 3 years and they won the Super Bowl and all that. Everyone looks at that and it's like, yeah, well, why would you want to get rid of the G? Yes, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. That was luck. That was fluke. That was lightning in a bottle. It was a magic carpet ride. Let's just keep it all the way 100. That was luck. That was not the trend or the norm because clearly the Eagles have fallen off since then. Let's go to the next season. The Eagles are 5-6. Nick Foles gets them into the playoffs. But the Eagles didn't even control their own destiny. They needed the Chicago Bears to beat the Vikings on a game they didn't have to win to backdoor their way into the playoffs. And then they got lucky because Cody Parkey or whoever missed a field goal at the end of the game or else the Chicago Bears would have won. Then you talk about last year, the Eagles are playing in one of the worst playing in the worst division in football. And they backdoor their way into the playoffs. And then this year they're trash. So this decline has been going on for a while. It's just been masked by these false illusions of playoffs. The Eagles have been backdooring their way into the playoffs in consecutive seasons. So it's giving the Eagles this illusion that they're a good team that's on the cusp or they're just on the brink. We just need a couple players to get us over the hump. But even then, the players you're investing in, they're not meaningful. You talk about, and then you talk about how he's surviving all this, and Doug being a scapegoat as well. How he protects his own behind. It's just like last year when Doug said he was going to bring back the offensive coordinator and some assistants. He said that one day. The very next day, he had to fire those same guys. And Howie Roseman was a part of that. And he left Doug out to dry. Because Doug thought he had control over his own offensive staff, and he really didn't. Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie said, nah, bruh, you ain't got control over nothing. We run this. So they haven't even empowered Doug Peterson. It seems like Doug Peterson's a puppet. That's what it seems like. Because I don't know why you be playing Alshon Jeffrey when he offers you nothing on the field. He's slow. He can't jump over a paper clip. Routes, they're terrible. He looks like he's lumbering every time he runs. This guy's not good. No one can make an argument that Alshon Jeffrey is a competent receiver. No one. You can't make that argument. He's not good. You look at this stuff, and then you take a look at like what Howie Roseman's done. Like, how can you make an argument that he stays? How can you make an argument that he deserves to? But this Jalen Hurts pick, if it turns out well, he's going to save his own behind. It's going to be like, oh, yeah, see, I knew Carson Wentz was going to start slipping up, so I did good by getting us this insurance policy. But this is a guy who knows nothing about NFL locker room dynamics. This is what I mean when he's not a football guy. Because if you saw the whole drama and how that tore the locker room apart with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, why would you then go re-invite that controversy by drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round instead of getting the quarterback help? That's causing your own dysfunction. He's like, oh, no rookie's gonna give competition to a Pro Bowl player, a guy we shown the commitment to Carson Wentz by the amount of money we've invested in him. Well, what about the amount of resources and help that you've surrounded him with? What about that? Did you think about that before you said that statement? Because a part of this whole operation is the fact that Howie Roseman is trying to be one of the smartest people in the room with his little Fordham law degree. He thinks he can outsmart people. And it makes sense. He keeps trying to apply logic to an NFL locker room. That's what people who go to law school do. Logic. The facts. But the reality is that's not all you can apply to an NFL locker room. If you saw how all that other stuff affected Carson Wentz, the statue outside the stadium, the Nick Foles controversy, why would you then go re-invite that by drafting Jalen Hurts? Why? It's like I said before, any way that you slice it, it's an idiotic move. If you're doing it because you don't believe in Carson Wentz, why did you pay him all that money and set this franchise up for failure as far as the cap situation? If you're doing it because you want a backup, you can get a backup in free agency. If you're doing it because you want to flip Jalen Hurts, number one, why didn't you just use the pick on a good player? And number two, the only way you're going to get better value than the 53rd overall pick is if he plays and Carson Wentz is not good or he's injured. And at that point, you have a QB controversy. So why would you invite that into your locker room? And what kind of message does that send when you're trying to turn over leadership to Carson Wentz and you're drafting a dude at his position who's well known? How does that make sense? You're sending mixed signals to the locker room. But he doesn't know that because he's not a football guy. He doesn't know how to evaluate players and tell you the difference between Justin Jefferson and Jalen Reagor because he's so fixated on speed. But he can't see that Jalen Reagor's a raw route runner, that he gets no separation down the field, that his hands were severely questionable. He can't tell the difference between Justin Jefferson, a guy who was flexible, could play in the slot or on the outside, runs crisp routes, has reliable hands, has good speed, knows how to stack corners, knows leverage. That's a part of the evaluation, but he's so fixated on speed. And what the Eagles did was they tricked you. They manipulated the Eagles fans' minds. This is what Howie Roseman did. He manipulated the Eagles fans' minds into thinking this was a good draft class because it was the most athletic draft class out of all the 32 teams. The analytics tricked a lot of Eagles fans. They added Jalen Reagor. They added Jalen Hurts. They added Davion Taylor, who's fast. They got John Hightower, who's fast, who has a fast 40 time. Quez Watkins. They tricked everyone. And then they added Godwin or Marquise Goodwin, and they tricked everyone. They tricked everyone with these athletic scores and this next gen stats and these analytics. They manipulated y'all into thinking this was a good draft class because it was speed and had you over here thinking that they are going to be the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFC. And everyone fell for this buffoonery. And I was like, no. And I've been saying it. I was ahead of the curve on this. This was a good draft class. That's why I was complaining about it the minute it happened. This was not a good draft class. Another suspect beyond suspect to trash draft class by Howie Roseman. And everyone's let him off the hook for it. Because he got Jalen Hurts. And he's the source of controversy. And all this dysfunction is happening. People keep saying this, oh, Carson Wentz is 2017 season. Oh, that's an anomaly. So if that's an anomaly, then that means he's never developed. And if he's never developed, why in the hell would you want to bring him back with Doug Peterson and this coaching staff? You think they can develop Jalen Hurts then? Who has less talent than Carson Wentz? That doesn't make any sense. Well, where does that make sense at? I don't even trust the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. Because if they trade Carson Wentz, they're going to be in cap hell. They're already in cap hell to begin with. They're the second most expensive roster in the league, and they're 4-8-1 or 4-9-1, whatever the heck they are. 4-8-1. This roster is already old, bad, and expensive. 3 things you don't want to be in the NFL. You're not going to be able to make any free agency moves. So you're going to be solely reliant upon the draft. Then you factor in the fact that the owner's not thinking about firing the GM. And now you think I'm going to trust this GM to draft talent around Jalen Hurts? Are you crazy? Yeah, y'all, no one thinks about that coming full circle and how that's going to affect Jalen Hurts, even if you get rid of Carson Wentz. You're not going to be able to do anything in free agency. Your drafting has been trashed the last 5 years. Why am I to believe that all of a sudden you're going to know how to draft good players now when you've never done that? Never. This doesn't make any sense. And since you know nothing about locker room dynamics, I know eventually you're probably going to backstab Jalen Hurts just the same way you backstab Carson Wentz by drafting his replacement and not surrounding him with talent. This is what I mean. Football guys don't do this. Dudes who know about locker room dynamics don't do this. Dudes who know how to evaluate talent do not do these types of things. They don't. I'm sorry, but they don't. So when you're looking at all this nonsense that's just going on around Carson Wentz, why would you not want out? Carson Wentz isn't an idiot. He sees this house is burning down. Why am I going to stay here and be the fall forward? No, I got to get ahead of this. So I'm not mad at him for if he did leak or if his camp leaked on game day. So what? So what? People have been criticizing him all year. Yeah, take it like a man. Well, guess what? The Eagles made a selfish decision and decided to look towards the future. Why can't Carson Wentz go to one of these teams like the 49ers, the Saints, the Broncos, the Colts, one of these teams with some good weapons and a good coaching, and get the heck up out of Philly because these fans don't appreciate you. Oh, but they will. It's all right. They will. When they see how well he plays somewhere else with a better coaching staff, better weapons, better support, and a competent GM, then, yeah. Then Philadelphia fans will realize, because I always hang my hat on this. Like I said, I'm not an expert in the NFL. I'm analytical. But when I've constantly listened to people, you have to have the coach, the quarterback, and the GM to have a functional franchise. The Eagles have the coach, I believe, but I believe he's going to be scapegoated. And this hasn't been Doug's best year either. But I don't think he's the main source of the problems. The Eagles have the quarterback. To me, he's just having a bad year. If any other quarterback were having a bad year, we'd be talking about helping him and surrounding him with more weapons and support, not getting rid of him. But since the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz is the only quarterback that's asked about his backup. Do you know how frustrating that is to be asked about your backup consistently, game after game, as you're playing poorly? What guy would want to deal with that? And then the Eagles, then you get to the GM, coach, quarterback, GM. You get to the GM. I don't think the Eagles have the right GM. Aside from 2017, when he hit on every single decision he made, LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, Ronald Darby, Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, he hit on every single move. Nelson Aguilar got lucky and had the best year of his career. He had been a bust up until then, leading the league in drops since he came into the league. All that time, all those moves the GM hit on, and since then he's hit on nothing. Nothing. You didn't want to get Jalen Ramsey. You didn't want to get DeAndre Hopkins. You didn't want to trade for Stephon Diggs. You didn't draft Justin Jefferson. You took J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who's a scrub and has 12 receptions in his career, over DK Metcalf, who's leading the league in receiving yards. You passed up on Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown. Like, why would I trust a GM when this dude's missing routinely on dudes that are right in front of his face? And I'm tired of people making the excuse, oh, every GM misses. Well, where's the talent on this Eagles team? One of your last 50 players selected is a Pro Bowler, and this the dude that's having the worst year of his career, Carson Wentz, that you're thinking about trading, or a dude that's demanding a trade, whichever way you want to slice it. That's the only homegrown talent you have as far as Pro Bowls. That's it? And you're talking about dropping Jalen Hurts into that? No. Why would I trust you? You know how to surround a quarterback with weapons. And if you do, you invest in the wrong things. You invest in dudes who are not good or are past their prime. Alshon Jeffrey? Deshaun Jackson? Zach Ertz, he was a top 4 tight end. We don't even know if he's a top 10 tight end right now. He's having a terrible year. You don't give the ball enough to Miles Sanders. Your offensive line, it's okay. It's aging. Lane Johnson's out for the year. Jason Kelsey, he's the only reliable starter. Brandon Brooks, this is his second Achilles injury in 3 years. Your left tackle, who's a first-round pick, he's out for the year. You don't even know about him, and when he was playing, he was terrible. You brought back Jason Peters, who demanded a bump in pay to move to left tackle, and he's given up the most sacks in the league, and he was injured for 4 games. You know how trash you got to be? Jalen Reagor, the Eagles, number one, he's not as fast as people think he is, and the Eagles don't know how to use him either. They don't know how to feature him in the offense. He's a first-round pick. You look at all the other receivers, Brandon Ayuk. You look at all the other receivers that were chosen in this draft. Brandon Ayuk, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Justin Jefferson, Chase Claypool, T. Higgins. Jalen Reagor's not better than any of those guys. Gabriel Davis, he's not better than him. With the Buffalo Bills, he's like the 4th receiver. This functional franchises don't do this. They don't invite controversy. They don't create dysfunction. And then you talk about Alshon Jeffrey. I got to go back to this Alshon Jeffrey thing, man, because it just really blows my mind that the Eagles did this. Alshon Jeffrey openly criticized the quarterback on 2 separate occasions to Josina Anderson, who I referenced earlier in the podcast. In this podcast, openly did it. The Eagles found out who it was, and they guaranteed his contract for 2020. So basically, the message that you're sending and the culture that you're setting in place is, if you openly bash the quarterback who we have invested in and who is the face of the franchise, you get more money guaranteed on your contract, or you get a contract extension. What kind of idiots do that? A functional franchise does not do that. It's like I said on my episode with Toby again. What matters more, your cap or your culture of your team? Because teams with good cultures win. Antonio Brown with the Steelers, my Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers got rid of him despite the fact that he was the best receiver in the league at the time. They got rid of him because of the culture of the Steelers. They didn't care that it was an $18 million, $21 million, whatever it was. They didn't care how big the cap hit was, because they were sending a message that this is the culture of the team. We don't care how highly you're paid. We will get rid of you. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are better for it. The Eagles should have got rid of Alshon Jeffrey that day, if not that same week. Once you found out who it was, you should have got rid of them, despite the cap restraints. Who cares? The culture of your team matters more. It's the same thing that happened with Russell Wilson. When all those defensive players were complaining and talking crazy about Russell Wilson, Seattle got rid of them immediately because Russell Wilson was going to be the face of the franchise. This is the same thing I said. I said it years ago. Whatever players were not on board and whatever players were for Nick Foles and not Carson Wentz, you have to get rid of them. You have to get rid of them because they're going to tear up your locker room. You can't have people in the locker room, they're divided on who the guy should be. You can't. They have to be all in or they need to be gotten rid of. Especially if you know who they are. Now, if they just don't say anything and they complain in their heads about it, that's different. But Alshon Jeffrey criticized the quarterback twice to Josina Anderson. Not once, but twice, and you found out about it and you guaranteed his contract. He didn't play the first 8-9 games, and now he only has 3 receptions for 30 yards on 9 targets in 5 games. And you got the head coach who's either being manipulated or he actually believes that Alshon Jeffrey's good, saying that, oh, he's a good player on our team. He's rounding into form. That's why he's getting snaps over Travis Fulgham. What kind of idiocy? What kind of lunacy? Like, what kind of operation are these guys running here? Alshon is healthier and playing better? That was the quote from Doug? Like, what kind of nonsense? Doug has to be he has to be being controlled. He has to be. He has to be being controlled because I don't believe that Doug's not an idiot. Doug cannot be this foolish. I just don't believe it. I just can't. There's no way you can turn on the tape and say say Alshon's playing better. There's no way. And there's another quote in the article about Howie Roseman. It says Doug knows he has to watch his back when it comes to Howie Roseman. This whole operation, no one's on the same page. That's what, if no one takes anything else away from this, from me talking on this episode, the Eagles are not on the same page. The head coach and the quarterback aren't on the same page. The head coach and the GM aren't on the same page. The only people that are on the same page is the owner and the GM, and the owner clearly has a blind spot for the GM and his mishaps. And we haven't even talked about this. The Eagles, no one's considered this. What if Jalen Hurts is not the answer? People are so quick trying to replace Carson Wentz. A 4-game sample size is not enough to know whether you are a franchise quarterback. So I guess you trade Carson Wentz because you can't bring back this dynamic. You can't bring back Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts together with Doug Peters. That's a whole other situation that I'm going to get into next in a second. But what if Jalen Hurts is not the answer? Then what? Then you're mired in mediocrity with bad cap situation, no young talent. So you're going to be a terrible team in the most vicious media capital, Philadelphia. Do you know they'll lose their minds if you blow this up and none of this works? If you choose Jalen Hurts over Carson Wentz, you trade Carson Wentz, you choose Jalen Hurts, you go into him for the 2021 season, and he's not the answer. Philadelphia fans and Philadelphia media are going to lose their minds. And especially you add a double whammy onto it. Carson Wentz goes to a beneficial situation and he's balling. Oh boy. But you can't bring back this dynamic of Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts, Doug Peterson. People have to go. If you're thinking about salvaging Carson Wentz, which is what I believe the Eagles should do, is salvage him because I still think he's a franchise quarterback. I think he's just having a bad year. But in that case, I don't think you could bring him back with Doug because I don't think Carson and Doug work. And you definitely can bring back at that point, you'd also have to trade Jalen Hurts because this situation has obviously played a toll or taken its toll on Carson, this whole Jalen Hurts situation. So you have to get rid of Doug and Jalen Hurts. If you bring back Carson, you deem that he is the person you want to move forward with in the future. And that's what they should do to me because that's where the money is tied up. I don't see, and people just need to understand this. This is not the NBA where you can just trade contracts. Regardless of whether Carson is on the roster or not, it's going to be a $33.6 million cap hit. 33.6, 33.8, 34, whatever it is. The cap hit is going to be there. So even if you trade Carson Wentz, there's no way to get from under that cap hit. The Eagles will suffer that cap hit no matter what, no matter if Carson Wentz voids his guarantees, if he restructures his deal, it does not matter. That cap hit is going to be on the Eagles cap for 2021. It's regardless. But if you want to get him all the way off the books for 2022, then you have to trade him now. Because on the third day of the league year, his part of his salary for 2022 is automatically, activated on the cap on the third day of the league year in 2021. So if you plan on trading him, you got to trade him before then. But I think the Eagles should keep him. And I think what's beneficial for the Eagles right now is this. This is my idea. You got to lose the rest of your games. I know no one wants to hear that. I know it doesn't sound good. But the Eagles gain no benefit from winning at this point. They get into the playoffs somehow, some way. What are they realistically going to do? Sure, you can say someone gets playoff experience, but this team is bad. They're not good. They're bad. And they're in more need of premium talent, which you can get with a top 5, top 6 pick, than they are playoff victory or playoff experience. I think getting a premium player, a foundational piece for this team, is more important than winning a playoff game or even making the playoffs and getting some of these younger players experience. I think that's way more valuable because the Eagles have no foundational pieces. We have people they think that can be foundational pieces for the future, Miles Sanders and Dallas Goedert, but we don't really know. There's no future Pro Bowl players on this roster right now. So I think that's what the Eagles should do. And the people I'm looking at, if the Eagles, get in the top 5, top 6, I'm looking at Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, or Micah Parsons, or Jalen Waddle. Those are the only players I think are foundational pieces for what the Eagles need, because the Eagles need linebacker help. The Eagles need to have a lot of things. They need help on the offensive line, although I think they can wait another year to do that because they got some people coming back. So I think they can wait another year on the offensive line. But they definitely need help at receiver because they have no immediate stars at receiver, none whatsoever. Tight end, Dallas Goedert's there. I don't think you need to invest in a second tight end. We're talking about offensive line. I wouldn't be mad if they did that, but I think they can wait a year on that, honestly. Then we're talking about defensive line. You have no elite edge rushers. Defensive tackle, you're kind of locked up there because you have 3 top 25 contracts paid to Javon Hargrave, Malik Jackson, and Fletcher Cox, so you can't do anything there. No point in getting another defensive tackle, which is another part of Howie Roseman's gaffes. Edge, Brandon Graham's getting up there in age, although he's having a career year, but you can't consistently rely on that. Derek Barnett, he's not nearly good enough. Linebacker, I perceive as the second biggest need on this team other than receiver. And then the Eagles have no answers at safety and have no number 2 corner opposite Darius Slay. And Darius Slay is going to be 30 next year, so you need another answer. So any of those moves in the first round would be okay with me. But the 2 moves that I would make would be either linebacker or receiver. Receiver because that helps who's ever at quarterback. And linebacker because that's the central command of the defense. And the Eagles are they have the worst linebacking core in the league. So someone like Micah Parsons could fix that. Yeah, or Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, or Devontae Smith could fix the receiver position. One of those 3 guys would immediately, no conjecture, no hyperbole, be the best receiver on this team. That's just my opinion. So I think that's what the Eagles need to do. As far as that's concerned. But when you're looking at this situation, it's hard to believe we're really here. 2-3 years after winning the Super Bowl, this team is old, they're bad, they're expensive, they're dysfunctional. And to me, it's all residue from the general manager. He hasn't shown that he could build an elite team. He hasn't shown it, which is why the Eagles have progressively gotten worse every year. And now all his bad roster decisions are culminating into a bad season. All the mismanagement, all the bad drafts. No team can stay good. I don't care how good your quarterback is when you routinely miss in the draft. Yeah, you could pay the quarterback all this money, but if you're not going to draft well, the team is going to suffer because of that. And Carson Wentz is suffering, to me, at least in my opinion. People have other takes, but to me, Carson Wentz is suffering from multiple bad years of drafting by the GM. And the GM not putting a competent supporting cast around him. That's my opinion of what has happened. And the GM's decision making, it's all over this roster. It's all over it. The perverse rot throughout this entire roster is the GM's responsibility. And it's sad that the owner cannot see that the guy that he has a blind spot for is responsible for this. It's sad. But when you talk about trade destinations for Carson Wentz, since, we're here now, might as well. I'm looking at the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers can get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo after this year and not be tied to him at all. So I'm looking at that. That could be a beneficial situation for Carson Wentz with good coaching, good O-line, running game. They have a good defense. And then the receiver, they have young receivers, best tight end in football, in my opinion, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. They have some good weapons over there. I'm also looking at Denver because Drew Lock is stinking it up and he is not a good quarterback. And he has Jerry Jeudy, who he's tweeting out stuff. He's obviously displeased with the rookie season he's having, and he's been getting open a lot. They just can't get him the ball. But Jerry Jeudy, they got a bunch of young weapons down there. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant. Got a good old line with Garrett Bowles. They got Glasgow down there, and even though they lost another tackle for the season early in the season, and they can make room for him by cutting A.J. Boye and Von Miller. So that would be beneficial. I think that would be a beneficial situation. Then you talk about they also got Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, dudes who have rushed for 1,000 yards in their career. So I think that would be a beneficial situation. I don't like the Patriots. Yes, Bill Belichick is a good coach, but the Patriots have the worst offensive weapons in the league. So that's just a no-go for me. I don't like that situation for Carson. The Colts, of course, good coach, one of the best GMs in football. Colts, to me, are just missing a quarterback. So, yeah, I think that'd be a good situation for Carson. And then the New Orleans Saints. I think that would be another beneficial situation. Drew Brees is obviously going to retire after this year. Taysom Hill is not a starting quarterback. Jameis Winston, we don't know about him. He's not proven. I think Sean Payton is someone who could fix Carson Wentz and coach him up correctly and fit in that offensive system with Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, Alvin Kamara with a good offensive line and a good defense. I think Carson Wentz to the New Orleans Saints would also be a good fit for him as well. And then we can even talk about the Tampa Bay Bucks. I don't know how long Tom Brady's extension is or his contract is. I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years, but that would come into play only if the Eagles decide to hold Carson on the roster. That's the only way I see that happening realistically. But I think it'd be an interesting destination. I think it's like a wild card. I don't like situations like the Panthers. Obviously, the Jets and the Jaguars are going to take Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence respectively. Yeah, I don't see any other teams really that need quarterbacks that have beneficial situations for Carson. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers. My Pittsburgh Steelers, that's still in the city. That's still in the state of Pennsylvania, right across the way from Philadelphia, the city of Pittsburgh. Established winning culture, good weapon, the youngest receiving core in the league with Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, Eric Ebron, Vance McDonald. James Conner will probably be gone, which is I have no problem with. Offensive line is good in pass protection, not as good in run blocking. I think that'd be a beneficial situation. A coach like Mike Tomlin, I think that'd be a beneficial situation for Carson Wentz as well. My very Pittsburgh Steelers. So I look at those trade destinations, the 49ers, the Saints, the Broncos, the Colts, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the Bucks are like a wild card. But those are teams I'm looking at because I think Ben Roethlisberger most likely will retire after this season, hopefully. So there's that. But yeah, that's about all I got. I just wanted to come on and talk about that. It's been an interesting year, of course, with the Philadelphia Eagles. They keep you guessing. It's frustrating, but at this point, I can't do anything but laugh, be a loyal fan, and, hope they lose so I can get one of these premium guys in the draft. Yep, that's what it's come to for me. This is going to be a long, long rebuild. And the worst part is if Doug and Carson are let go of or Carson's just let go of and how he continues to stay, I know this is just going to repeat itself. I just don't trust Howie Roseman. I'm sure he could be a good GM somewhere else, but he doesn't belong in Philadelphia anymore. I'm sorry. He's just unqualified to me. He's a numbskull. And when you haven't played sports in your career, this is what happens. Dudes who don't know the dynamics of a locker room, dudes who have never played competitively, they just sit and they watch from the press box and analyze and all this stuff and apply their logic to the football world. It doesn't make sense. And you can see these moves as I outline them and I detail them. They don't make sense. But until then, that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate you for listening. Like always, if you got questions, comments, concerns, you can hit up AC and ask. I'll be here. As always, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. See you when I see you. One love.